Paragraph at a time. Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining me as I share a dream. And I want to say something right off the bat. First of all, I believe that God speaks to people. Without question, I believe that God still speaks today. I believe He still speaks through the Word, obviously, as through time and prayer, obviously. I believe He speaks through family and friends. I believe He speaks through conversations you didn't know you were about to have. I believe He speaks through circumstances and situations. And I also believe He speaks through dreams and visions. And I want to make something very clear today. Um, because I know that everybody's got a different idea, a different opinion about dreams, what they are, what they mean, what they do. And I believe that sometimes God just gives you a dream to confirm things that are going on in the world and also just to show you His perspective. Just Sunday morning, yesterday morning, I shared a dream with a young man in my church that I had about him. And I said, I believe this involves your future. And it wasn't a prophetic dream, it was just confirming the path that he was on, taking. Shared it with him, told him about it, and I believe it encouraged him. So, this dream today that I'm sharing is called the birthing dream. I had it started on August 3rd, went to about the 19th or so. What day is today? Today's the 25th. Yes, so about August 19th. As usual, it was like a trailer for a movie dream. I finally saw the man on the 18th, and the 19th it kind of finished up. That's just the way they work in my life. And so, if you're listening today, I encourage you to just to see the sentiment of the dream. Um, I've had both Cherie's given me some notes, and Alexis Lambert, who I asked. She mentioned something to me. We began to talk, and I told her I'd like to see what she thinks. And I asked that of her because everybody's got a different perspective. Now, look, um, there'll be people who will send me their interpretation of this dream 10 minutes after I go off air. Okay. I can tell you I've spent at least 30 hours praying about this dream. And any dream typically that we share, even with Cherie, I put 24 hours into. I know she would put that amount of time into it. Um, I know that it's important to pray about these dreams, and not every dream is from God. But I also believe that God shows me something every day. I hear His voice in different. I know what His voice sounds like. So I'm going to read through the dream and then go back and paragraph at a time, kind of highlight what was there. Okay. Okay. As the dream began, there was a woman in travail and close to giving birth on a table below me. And it was kind of like looking down at a operation theater in a hospital, and like when there'd be doctors and things all around. I'm the only one looking down though to see this. Okay, there were several doctors and nurses in the room, but their faces were completely covered, not just with the mask, but the head covering, everything else, and they were all gloved up, ready to go like into surgery, have a baby. Okay, but in the watching area where I was, standing room only. It wasn't doctors up there. It was filled with elected officials from both federal and state positions, movie stars, athletes, reporters, and foreign leaders, and they all had clipboards and were writing furiously on the papers with thick, permanent markers. They were putting marks on the papers and passing them around. No words or phrases, just marks that were not like any signs I recognized. They were also pushing to be at the front of everybody else. Everybody wanted to get really close to this woman who was in travail and about to give birth. Every time the woman would cry out in pain, the people would yell at her to deal with the pain and just give birth to it. Then the walls were moved out, and I could see that this was a production studio. And there was an audience watching this play out, like you'd see it's taped before live studio audience back in the 70s and 80s. This was what it looked like. And there was about 1,000 people who were totally focused on watching this thing play out. Okay, and I was in the front row of this 1,000 people who are watching this. Now, the number of doctors and nurses has doubled, and there are even more people on the floor with clipboards. Once again, elected officials, athletes, movie stars, people like that. Um, the elites, higher up people with a higher pay grade than me. And there were also huge TV screens and monitors on the wall behind the woman, right behind her. and they were showing clips and videos of things happening around the world, almost as if it was real time. When you looked at the TV, you thought, this is going on right here and right now. Okay? The woman let out a blood-curdling scream, and a nurse put a towel over her mouth and very firmly told her to settle down. The primary doctor went to the side door and let a person in who was wearing a full hazmat suit, and they approached the bed and the woman. He lifted the sheets over her legs and examined her, and all the while the nurse was holding the towel over her mouth and just shushing her to be quiet. The man in the hazmat suit said, "It won't be long, so prepare for the birthing." The nurse repeated these words to the woman, and I realized by her face that she was not in her right mind. She had this weird look like she was on drugs or something. I don't understand. She's about to give birth. She's in pain. Have no idea how long labor has been in this scenario. Okay. She appeared drugged and agitated with the veins in her face very large, and there was like one large vein just pushing through her forehead. Okay. She was red and tense, and her eyes were darting all over the room, looking at everybody, just looking like she was like an animal or something, just trying to make contact with her eyes with people, just looking like she was nervous, terrified, and afraid. Okay. The TV screens showed people fleeing urban areas, running to their cars with suitcases and backpacks. They showed traffic backed up at airports, runways filled with planes waiting to depart. There were clips of people not getting signals on their phones and were lined up outside of stores and very angry. Wall Street was reported as having no way to look at trades or shares or prices, and markets around the world had all gone dark. Governments around the world were talking to each other and trying to put out the social fires and even the real fires that had started because of this. One scene showed an aide yelling at the Prime Minister of Great Britain and asking, "What are you waiting for?" He turned and turned a TV on in the room, and he pointed at it and he said, I am waiting on that." And what was on the screen that he was waiting on was the scene of the woman about to give birth. She was now straining, and her back was arched, and the veins on her forehead seemed close to bursting. It was like it was moving. It was pressure. The man in the hazmat suit sat on a stool at her feet while the people in the room were crowding around and pushing each other to get close. The TV screens flashed the words, "Silence, please," and hold applause until after the arrival. The crowd watching from the seats were on their feet with some holding their hands over their hearts. The guy at the woman's feet put his arms out and spoke to the lady quietly but firmly, and he said, "When I say to push, you will push. Do you understand?" It was a command. I then noticed that this woman was actually fighting the entire process. He then spoke to all the people around the woman and to those seated and watching in the audience. He brings them all in. And he says, "We have waited a long time for this to arrive. Many of you are to be thanked for your sacrifices and your plotting. You will now see the cooperative efforts that the nations and leaders and companies have produced." And among the crowd around that woman, I suddenly saw many begin to grab their chests like this, and they dropped to the ground as if a heart attack was taking them down. The man said, "No need to worry about these, as it was their sacrifice and their lives that made this event possible," almost speaking in a patriotic fashion. He then said, "Their reward is on the other side." Then people in the audience around me, I'm sitting in the front row, people around me in the audience began to die as well. They started running up the stairs trying to get away. They're grabbing their hearts, their chests, and they're just falling over. I looked back and I saw the man that I see in the dreams. He was sitting in the very back seat, many rows back. Things shifted back to the birthing woman, and she was screaming bloody murder, agony, absolute pain. Baby was coming. The man in front reached down and pulled the baby from between her legs, and two nurses wrapped it in a purple and a blue cloth. The mother said, "No," quietly, and then she took her last breath and she died. And her eyes stayed open on the baby that those nurses had in their hands. The TV screens showed people were all looking at the child now. So all those people who were in disarray and Wall Street and at airports, everybody's watching the screens. They're all looking up at the child now being lifted up in the air by the man in the hazmat suit. And so, yes, it's the Lion King, Mufasa, holding up the little lion cub. It was just like that, holding this child up in the air. And then someone on the screen cried in joy, but some people took off running because of what they saw, like they were terrified. And then someone yelled very loudly, "Cut! Cut!" A production man in a suit and tie came to the front with a clipboard, and he said, "Folks, this is the end of the production, and new episodes will be filmed right here weekly. Please come back and please hand in your scorecard and notes to the receptionist on your way out." The dead on the floor got up. The woman who had given birth left the bed, was wiping makeup off of her face and her forehead. People in the stands that had supposedly died all stirred. They got up. They went down the floor where the scene had played out. And they're wiping themselves off and things like that and trying to clean themselves up. The man came and sat beside me in the front row because I hadn't moved in the dream. It all seems like a show with a great script, and they even think they know what's going to happen before it does, he said. They imagine and scheme and plot to not get hurt by what's coming, but they won't beat it. This thing they want so badly is going to cost them their lives and their livelihood. It will require blood, and it's much more than just a man or a system. It has a will. It breathes. It lives, and it requires blood. Let him who has ears hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. And let him discern and test those spirits with absolute scrutiny. When something in your mouth is not good, you take it out. But some things need spat out far away from your table. The church needs to spit more out, lest it become poisoned and weak and diseased. There is one that's coming, and the world knows it, and it waits. But they ignore that I am coming too. And with that, the man stood, and he said, "Watch with your eyes and your heart, and keep your hands open." Once again, this dream I had August 3rd through the 19th. I believe it's a confirming dream of where we are, the things that are happening in the world. I go back to that first part where the doctors and nurses had their faces covered completely. They were surgical masks, but they were attempting to hide their identities. The people who are kind of who are the masterminds behind this do not want you to know who they are. We talk about the deep state. We talk about the elites. We don't really have a picture, an idea of who they are. We don't know what the foundational elements are, but those masks also show a type of hidden agenda. And I want to give credit due both to Cherie and to Alexis for sharing ideas with me. Just kind of mixing them in the pot and going through. But there was a hidden agenda right from the bat. The woman's giving birth, about to give birth, and the people had their faces covered. So the medical people in there, you could not see who they were. Now, did I know who the other leaders and people were? Yes, I did. I saw faces. I know who some of them were. Some I didn't. Some I recognized. The Great Britain Prime Minister, I definitely recognized them. But the movie stars, athletes, reporters, the elites of the world, they're just like cast members in this production. They may have funded it, but there's also part of the audience. The people that are out there watching this, there are people that know what's happening. There are people that know what's going on, and also those the things on the clipboard. A lot of times they'll do a pilot. They'll shoot a pilot, see how people like it, react. And a lot of times those people are given surveys. How would you think about this? You like it or not? But the thing is, these weren't surveys whether we like it or not. This script is written. It's being followed word for word, action for action, scene by scene. It's going to happen. And so it's almost like they're checking things off. Yes, this is going the way it needs. It's almost like a dry run. And even in the dreams itself, until I heard the word cut and realized in the dream, okay, this is a production. I've been watching a TV show. Everything was perfect. Everything was scripted just like it was. And so they're kind of checking off boxes. But they're also involved with this deeply. And they're not worried about who's watching. They are worried about making sure they get their lines right, making sure they get their parts right, making sure they're where they need to be in the scene. And also, these people, the world leaders, all those people, there's benefits that they get from being in this, okay? There was an audience that was watching, and there were people close by, some of which looked like they appeared to die. So there was a sacrifice that they were going to be making as well for being a part of this, okay? And there's literally, when they moved the walls out and you realize there's the audience behind there, it was a production studio. They were rehearsing, almost like they were performing so that they could control the events that are coming. Now we understand this is the spirit of Antichrist is very much there. And I've said it and I'll say it again. How no matter how crazy it sounds, I do believe the Antichrist is alive and well on planet Earth. And I don't think he's been exposed or revealed yet, but I believe not just the spirit of Antichrist is here, which John tells us clearly it is here. I do also believe that we're seeing things happen that are laying the groundwork for eventually him to walk in. It may be a settling moment, it may be a political moment, a government moment, I don't know, but there's going to be a time when the world says, we need you, we need this guy. But this is a show. They're filming, it's a production, and it's scripted. And it's a show, which means, in other words, it's a lie to the people that are watching. And people that are watching, and even on the TV screens, they were seeing crazy things going on. But when it came time for this baby to be born, they all started watching the baby and were not concerned about the challenges and the crazy things around them. It was almost like they were practicing and performing so that they could control the events. And if you control the events, you control the narrative. The doctor, the primary doctor, had gone to the side door with this person wearing the full hazmat suit. So if you've ever seen, like in the CDC, in the biohazard labs, let's say Wuhan. Can anybody say Wuhan? Say it with me, Wuhan. I knew you could. You know, all these labs that have these incredibly vile, terrible viruses and things like that. Hazmat literally means, typically when you're in a hazmat suit, it's because there are hazardous, dangerous, biological chemicals that are around you, and it equals disease, so you can't touch it. And I find it interesting that the person that was kind of guiding the birth of this child was wearing a hazmat suit, not the nurses. They just got the baby and wrapped him up and then been handing it back to this guy who's wearing a hazmat suit, meaning something was very, very off with this child. And in these suits, you can breathe in it, but you got to be connected to oxygen. It's not something that you know. Hazmat suits are necessary because something is airborne. Okay, now please understand, I do not believe this has anything to do with COVID. I don't think this has to do with anything with these things. I do not believe that at all. I just believe that the fact that this guy was wearing a hazmat suit tells us the toxicity of the Antichrist, the toxicity of leadership, and the plan that they have to put this man into power without even realizing what they're doing. The nurse was holding that towel over that woman's mouth, in spite so the birth pains could not be heard. Okay, well, when you're screaming in pain giving birth, it's because you're about to give birth and your body's going through contractions. You're pushing this child out of the womb, and so there's going to be pain, there's going to be agony. And this one nurse is just really holding it down, like, do not let them know how much this hurts. There's a there's a spiritual rule here. The Antichrist will not want anyone to know what it's going to cost. That once you take the mark, you are doomed for life, for eternity. So there's evil at work here. They don't want the world to really see what's happening. They don't want the world to really know what's happening. The deep state, the elites, whoever they are, you know, something's going on out there underneath the surface that nobody sees. It's the under the table, underhanded things. And that's literally, in one sense, how the Antichrist will come to power, with help, with nations, with funding, with support. And the other thing about the lady having the baby, that vein, the vein was just kind of like vibrating. It looked kind of odd. It almost looked like a worm or something was underneath the skin. But one of the points that was made was that they were reproducing insanity. She was giving birth to something that was going to cause major chaos in the world. Now look, babies, when they're born, they're soft, they're a little pudgy, they might have hair, they might have a tooth, they have a smell. Babies are just wonderful to have. I miss my kids being that little. But You start thinking and dreaming about what that child's going to do, what that child's going to become, what gifts and talents they have that you don't see yet. But in this narrative, something was being born, which I believe was an Antichrist type situation. And if these things are working in our world, I think I get a drink. Hang on. Thank you for your lack of holding me to absolute professional standards. Also, those TV screens were showing things that nobody wanted to see. They showed the worst fears. They showed the challenges and the difficulties of life. Airports backed up, the Wall Street not working. I saw people getting in their cars and fleeing, running as far as they could to hide, to get away, to do, things like that. And they were moving towards open air, open spaces. And literally, look, most people, if let's say you're in New York and things get really bad there, there's terrorism, there's crazy things, and the world's kind of like ending, that sort of thing, that mass apocalyptic type thing. You're not going to say, hey, let's go to Boston or Baltimore. Hey, Newark's across the, let's just go. You're going to avoid the cities. And you're going to avoid the cities because things are crazy there. And in the dream, what I saw in the mall, people were trying to get as far away from cities as they could, far away from those places. And these things were also what the world feared, but hopes never happens. These are the things that the world fears, but they really just truly hope never happens. And look, the one of the key things I think in this was the fact it was a TV show, was a production. It was scripted. Somebody knows what's going on. And they may not realize who if I ask you your favorite TV show, you might say it. But if I say, who's the executive producer of that show, you're going to be like, I don't know. Who directed that? So when you're watching a production, you're thinking about the actors and the people that are doing the action. You're not thinking about who put the movie out. You're not thinking about the advertisers who pay for that. You're not thinking about the people who wrote that script. So when that one aide yells at the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and she says, what are you waiting on now? I see this as impacting what's going on in Great Britain right now. Because the people are rising up and saying, we're fed up with this. And the people are wanting the Prime Minister to do something. So could that play out in this? Yeah, sure, it probably could. But he says, the aide says, what are you waiting for? And he turns the TV on and he points and he says, that, I am waiting on that. I believe there's a lot of governments right now that are waiting on somebody else to guide them, lead them, steer them. Just like there are nations right now that are hoping that the President of the United States will step in and our money will go there and our missiles will go there and our military will go there. There's all sorts of nations out there depending on somebody else to help them, to fix them. They don't have the money. They come to the UN, they're crying, they're begging. And I just see this. Very interesting that it's Great Britain, especially after Brexit and all that's going on there. Another thing that I saw in the dream was that this woman was really in the scripting. She was fighting the process. She was fighting the process. And there are going to be those that are resistant. There'll be people who are left. I believe in rapture once again, and I believe that there'll be people left here, and there'll be people who understand that they missed that, and they're living for the Lord, and they're trying to get people to understand that this is not God. This is a demonic caricature of it's the Antichrist. It's not godly at all. And there'll be people who fight that, resist that. But this woman's given birth, and it appeared that she was on drugs or whatever. In other words, I don't think the world has any clue to the insanity that's going to be unleashed when the Antichrist walks this earth. And especially after 3.5 years, when he breaks the peace agreement, when he says, this is who I am, and you really see who he is, that world is going to lose its mind. It'll be at that point when he says, if you don't get a mark, you can't buy, you can't sell, you can't live, you can't do anything. And the world realizes, oh, wow, now some will just jump right in. There's always somebody who wants the grandma to live their life for them, or live its life through them. But she was fighting the process. I have, from time to time, there's an individual that emails me constantly, And if you're watching, hey, I'm gonna give you I'm gonna give you some screen time. This person tells me that they're praying constantly that God will just eradicate the Antichrist, do away with that unholy Trinity, and just they won't even have to go through tribulation. I'm sorry, folks, it's in the book, and if this book says it's going to happen, you can set your calendar. It's going to happen, and it's going to last for 7 years. Let's get back on the audience. I mentioned that some of the people in the audience around me act like they were dying. So the real truth is that in this, even though this is a scripted event, the people who scripted it know that in the reality, there will be people who pay an ultimate price for all of this. Remember, the Hazmat man said, their rewards on the other side when people start to die. Whole point is, there are people who are selling themselves out right now so that there will be an antichrist in power. There are liberal ideologies out there that are so ridiculous, and people are going to bat, people are funding, people are yelling and screaming and everything else they can to really get those things happening and going on. Somebody's going to try to be in control, and they're rehearsing it. I've made this statement. That they're laying the asphalt for the Antichrist to come in. Folks, they're scripting this. They're getting ready to shoot this production. It's going to be live one day, and they want to be in control. Somebody wants to be in control because you got to control the narrative. You got to control the people. Even the elites are looking for that aspect of it. And the baby's role, as you look at this, is kind of priestly or royalty, but it's not reality. They wrap them in purple and blue. Purple is a royal color, but purple and blue together, it's like a hybrid. I know there are nations like Egypt that had a history of those two colors, and Rome did a lot as well. Red was also a primary color. But this child, this baby, this man, so to speak, is going to have his own color. He's going to have his own race. He's going to have his own creed. He's going to have his own plan and agenda, inspired by Satan himself. And we also got to realize that the people that are in this dream, they're not actors. There's going to be real people, real government aides, real presidents, prime ministers, leaders of nations who are going to come up beside this man at one point and say, we will support you, we will put you in place. And I don't know if there'll be other national leadership forums like the United Nations or NATO. We don't know how things could change and shift overnight. But there's going to be a worldwide support for this individual. And even though you see these people there, when the child was born, there were people who seemed to die. There were people who were scared. There were people who were ecstatic. And that was because it's based on their understanding of what's going on, of what happened in this scene, and of why they're seeing these certain things. And I'll be honest, in the dream, when the person yelled, cut, it was loud. Everybody just kind of stopped and, oh, okay, scene's done. They stopped acting. They stopped acting. And there's coming a time when God's going to say, cut, and it's going to go to real. They talked about you can come back and new production, new episodes going to be filmed here every week. So we don't know what episode is next. All we know is this is a continuing thing. This isn't just a pilot and that's all there's going to be. This is going to be a pilot. They're going to be doing the next season. They're starting a season of things like that. It's a production. And sometimes when you watch government, what you see is a production. What you see is an act. What you see is with all the cameras and lights and the makeup and everything else. And this is where it's at. I want to spend most of my time with the dream on what the man said. He says, it all seems like a show with a great script. They even think they know what's going to happen before it does. There's a whole lot of people in our world, in our culture, in our society. They think they've got it all figured out. and they don't have any idea what's going on. Everybody was watching everybody else perform their parts. Even the people on the TV screens running and putting luggage in their cars and taking off. They were part of the script. They were watching, but they represent real people in the future that will be watching these things and trying to figure out what in the world is going on. And even though they think they know what's going to happen, they don't. There are world leaders that think they know what's going to happen, but they don't. And when he says it will require blood, and it's much more than just a man or a system, I think we realize that. Everybody that I know is trying to figure out what in the world the mark of the beast is and what it looks like. You know what? Whatever it is going to be an eternally condemning thing. And those that take it, they have no hope. They have no chance. Second death is all they get. All they get. And then he says, let him that has ears, let him hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Not churches. What the Spirit's saying to the church, the body of Christ, worldwide. This is not a dream just for people in America. This is for the church universal. Let him discern and test these spirits with absolute scrutiny. In other words, spirit of Antichrist is here. We know that. The deluding influence that Paul talks about in Thessalonians is here. We know that. We see people doing the strangest, weirdest, most mind-numbing things imaginable. And they're not even thinking about it. When something in your mouth is not good, you take it out, but some things need spat out far from your table. Folks, what you need to do is make sure that what you believe lines up with this book. You need to make sure that what you're hearing, what you're reading, what you're seeing, who you're watching, who you're following is following this book. Why? Because that book is truth. Jesus said, thy word, my word is truth. The church needs to spit more out, lest it become poisoned and weak and diseased. And I began to really think about the way those words were positioned in there. Poisoned, weak, diseased. You can be really, really strong, get food poisoning, and you are down on the floor or the bed for a week. And then because you've been poisoned or because you've been food poisoned, it can then cause other things to go on with your body and your organs. And so the poison makes you weak, but it also potentially brings on disease. And what Jesus is saying, I believe, is he's saying, look, whatever you put in your mouth has the ability to poison you, weaken you, and to bring disease to your life. So stay away from it. Spit it out. Spit it out. Spit it out. Get that stuff out of your mouth. Jesus said, if you're lukewarm, I will spit you. I will spew you out. And there's a violence to that, to just get as far away from you as possible. And when he said, as far away from your table, typically at a table, you're with somebody else. You're sharing foods, you're sharing stuff. So if what you put in your mouth is poison, then it's going to poison the people you're with. So that means get away from the people that are poisoning your food. Get away from the people that are trying to get you to eat something that's not good for you. Church has to stop doing this, and that means the church has got to chew and chew and chew on the word. And it means the word, you have to get the word in you get in the word until the word gets in you. In other words, what he's saying, in this day and age when all these scripts are being written and people are starting to play their part and their role, you better know what the truth is so you can live it out, because that's going to matter. He then says, there's one that's coming, and the world knows it, and it waits. But they ignore that I am coming too. They ignore that I am coming too. Yep. Sometimes I know a lot of people looking more for the Antichrist and his leadership than they are Jesus. There's only one we should be looking for. Look up, for your redemption draws near. And then he says, he stood up and he said, watch with your eyes and your heart and keep your hands open. Now, when your hands are open, it's so you can receive something. We know that. Deuteronomy chapter 15 and verses 8 through 10, the ESV says, but you shall open your hand to him and lend him sufficient for his need, whatever it may be. Take care lest there be an unworthy thought in your heart, and you say, the 7th year of the year release is near, and your eye look grudgingly on your poor brother, and you give him nothing. And you cry the Lord against you, and you be guilty of sin. Basically, he says, look, in Deuteronomy, he says, look, folks, there's going to come a time when people that are poor don't have anything to come to you. And you can't say, well, this next year is coming up very quick. And they'll be able to get what they need. He says, if your hand's open, you're going to help what's in your open hand, and you're going to give that. Deuteronomy 15:11 goes on to say, for there will never cease to be poor in the land. Therefore I command you, you shall open wide your hand to your brother, to the needy, and to the poor in your land. And there was one very interesting, a few verses in Psalm chapter 7 that Cherie shared with me, 14 through 16. Behold, the wicked man conceives evil and is pregnant with mischief and gives birth to lies. He makes a pit, digging it out, falls into the hole that he's made. His mischief rests upon his own head, and on his own skull his violence descends. But just the fact that it says is pregnant with mischief and gives birth to lies. I believe the dream is just confirming some things with where we are in the timeline, reminding us that Jesus is coming back, reminding us that we've got stuff to do. We've got people to reach. We've got to get the gospel out there. And I said this morning on my live to pray with me. I'm hearing from pastor friends that are going through some of the strongest battles that they have ever gone through in their ministry, in their lives, in their individual lives, in their individual families. And there are pastors and leaders that are hurting right now and don't know what to do. I have prayed with several pastors just this last week. I have talked to even more who would just say, hey, just pray for me, because, man, this is really getting hard, really getting difficult. The financial pressures, the attendance pressure. Look, folks, COVID impacted the church. It's impacted mine. It's most likely impacted yours. And I assure you that there are things happening out there that we see the work of the Antichrist, the spirit of the Antichrist, the spirit of Antichrist at work. We see the mockery, we see the laughing and the joking about God's people. We see, look, I promise you, for the next 12 to 48 hours, I'm going to get some of the most obscene emails and messages and here at the church because people out there just like to do that sort of thing. And if you leave a voicemail, I'm going to pray for you. And if you send me an email, I'm going to pray for you. They're going to go in a special folder, a special file. And if I need to show them to law enforcement, I will do that as well. But people don't want to hear the truth. And I just want to remind you, folks, this word shows us the script. This word shows us the things that are coming. This word shows us, and even before he gets into the teachings of what the tribulation will be and the millennial reign and all that, what does Jesus do? He writes the letters to 7 churches and he warns them. He warns them. He says, be ready, be watching, be patient, be thinking these things through. You've got the story that you're alive, but you're dead. He's speaking to them. He's trying to get their attention. And I pray that God gets our attention today. So I also encourage you, if you're having dreams, write them down. And if God's speaking to you through dreams, share them with somebody. And because I believe, once again, that God is giving you and me dreams for a reason. And they're not always going to be prophetic. They might be to help you find something. They may be to confirm something in your life or going on with you. I had a guy one time back in Terre Haute. He asked me to pray about a guy he worked with. He needed to know whether he should reach out to him. This guy's just kind of, he was seemed very, very evil, seemed very, very mean. And this guy's like, I just need to know if I should even, I don't even know if this guy's going to hit me or shoot me, or when I try to witness to him, I'm just kind of afraid. So he said, will you pray? And I said, okay. I prayed for a couple of days, and God gave me a dream. And God gave me a dream of the guy at the church going to work. And he was at they did welding, they did mechanical repair and stuff like that on industrial stuff. And in the dream, I see this guy wearing a motorcycle jacket. He's got his hair in a ponytail, and he's kind of the hairline starts way back here, and he had a tattoo of a scorpion on his left arm, and I see this guy walk up, and this guy walks up to the guy wearing the jacket and everything, and he pulls up a welder's helmet. He pulls up the face, and he says, "Hey, you okay if I tell you about Jesus?" And the guy's like, "Sure." And the guy shuts his mask. He said, and I guess they sit down and start talking. So I told the guy, I said, "Hey, um, I'm gonna describe a person in a dream I had." And I said, I saw the guy wearing a motorcycle jacket. He's got a big long ponytail, and his hair starts back here. And it's like, yeah. I said, "Does he happen to have a tattoo of a scorpion?" "Yeah." "You need to talk to him about Jesus." "Are you sure?" I said, "Well, he didn't kill you in the dream, so I think you need to talk to him about Jesus." Talked to the guy about Jesus. Eventually led him to the Lord. And he just didn't think he had the, I guess it was a cultural thing. He just, well, I don't look like him or this or that. You know what? That's fine. I believe that God gives us dreams for a reason. So I want to pray that we'll take the dream and we'll pray about it and we'll see what God's saying to us. And we'll also be ready for the things that are happening. Remind the world that Jesus is coming back, folks. All right. Holy Spirit, I pray that those that have listened today will pray and they'll seek your face. I believe, God, you give us dreams for a reason. I believe that I believe that there's a meaning to every dream that you give us, especially. I know sometimes we just have dreams because of what we ate or slept or things going on. But I realize, Lord, you give us dreams to take care of issues and concerns in our lives. I know you give us dreams to give us direction. And I know, Lord, you give us dreams to confirm where we are and what's coming. So for the body of Christ that's listening to this dream, I'm asking you to manifest your presence and your power and your fire in them. And I pray, Lord, for those that are having dreams, they will not be afraid to share those dreams or talk about those dreams with anybody else for that matter, God. Let them hear your voice through it. And I pray that as they pray through this dream, they'll see things, Lord, that you want them to see. And by showing them those things, you'll help them to recognize and know the direction, the path that they need to walk on. And we need to live out as Christians here in America today. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, folks, thank you for stopping by. I'm not seeing any comments on the side, not that that's important, but it could just be I've had a lot of issues with StreamYard recently, and I'll get that all figured out. But thank you for if you yelled or screamed at me in the comments, I can't see them, but which might be good. But I greatly appreciate you watching. I greatly appreciate you being a part of this. Hey, pray through it, folks, and see what God says. All right. And if you're having dreams, run down and share them with somebody. Hey, God bless.